Welcome everyone to From Dirt We Grow. I'm your host, Stephanie Kendall. And before we get into today's content, I have to remind you to please hit me with that LSB, the like, subscribe, and bell. And don't forget to share with all of your friends. And let me go ahead and introduce you to my guest. His name is Josh. He's going to tell you a little bit about his podcast right now.
So my podcast is called From Homeless to Mansion. It's everywhere you find podcasts, and it's just going on about my story from being the homeless child I talked about to being successful now and like all of the wild and awful things that happened to me throughout that time.
All right, welcome to the show, Josh.
Hey, really glad to be on here.
Why don't you tell us just a small touch about you?
In case you didn't get it already, my name is Josh. I guess my story really begins, in Kentucky. I grew up homeless. It was a pretty rough upbringing, to say the least, and lots of trials and tribulations there. I joined the military when I was 18, spent a long time there. I did air traffic control for a while, and then I was actually a hacker for the government, and then I left the military and made some money, working some other jobs, and now I've got all the success I could have ever dreamed of.
You hear all these success stories, rags to riches, and you're like a real life rags to riches story.
It's crazy.
I bet. What was the position that you were in that you ended up homeless? Like, where were your parents? Were your parents with you when you were homeless? Were you a homeless child alone? What's going on there?
Well, like most people, I think I'm the product of divorce. So I was mostly raised by my mom, and the first little bit was okay. I guess she was pretty active in my school. I think she would volunteer to go on field trips and chaperone, and she was always in the classroom. But I don't think she ever really wanted to be a mother, and so she just kind of spiraled slowly over those first few years. And she was around, but she couldn't hold down a job. She couldn't hold down a place to live. The alcoholism, the drugs, they both got worse over time. And my dad, he was more stable, but he wasn't really in the picture. And I mean, he was a drug dealer himself and did drugs, of course, but he also owned his own construction company. So again, a little bit of stability there, but he just wasn't around that much.
Did he maintain that business through his addiction?
Yeah, I mean, to this day, he still owns his construction business, and I mean, he just turned 70 a few days ago. So he, can't really move around that much, but he still does some of that work.
But he maintained his fully functional addiction status his whole life. That's impressive, I gotta say.
Yeah,
Not in your situation. I'm not praising the guy. I'm just saying that is pretty impressive, though.
I know. I mean, his main thing was always selling drugs. He did them as well, but he was always more about the selling. And I mean, he had his I guess lower class type of clientele. The upper class clients. I mean, he sold cocaine to doctors and people who owned their own insurance companies. I mean, really important people. Specifically, there was an anesthesiologist who worked at a university in Kentucky, and he sold drugs to him all the time.
Okay, I gotta say that's pretty fucking scary that you don't know that your doctors and anesthesiologists and those kind of people are high on cocaine when they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. I always thought that was wild. He would take me out to this guy's house, and this guy had bought really nice. I don't know if it was a mansion, but it was a really big log house out in the woods. Some country star used to own it, out in the woods in Kentucky, and just acres and acres of land. This place was gorgeous, and so my dad would take me out there, and him and this guy would be doing drugs in the bathroom, and I'm just chilling in the hot tub. It I don't know. I guess growing up with it, I just kind of thought it was normal, it's all I had ever really known.
You would,
So,
yeah.
looking back on it now, and when I tell my stories to people, I can see the look in their faces, and this is clearly not normal.
That's not normal. But to you, it's normal. So what do you? Yeah, why are you looking at me crazy? This is what it is,
Yeah, exactly.
What happened with your mom? So where she lost her home and everything, and
yeah, I mean, we so my dad was really into real estate, and this was before I was born, and then I think they got divorced. I was a year old or something, And so he owned a bunch of houses, but then he lost them all, like through, I guess, having to sell them through the divorce, or I don't really know the full story there. But he didn't have any more property, and so I was living with my mom in like apartments. We never like had a house. She definitely never owned any property. So I mean, it was all just like apartments. And towards like my middle school years, it was like if we had a place to stay, it was a roach infested slum in the middle of like downtown.
And you're in Kentucky at this point.
Right. Then
Okay.
this was back in like the late 90s, early 2000s.
So where did you guys live when you were homeless? Like, did you go into shelters? Did you live under bridges? Like,
So there were definitely a lot of nights sleeping in the car, and that was. I mean, I don't know if you've ever slept in a car, but that's it's not comfortable.
it's not comfortable. I've never slept in a car as that was my permanent home, but you fall asleep in the car sometimes.
Right,
On
right.
trips and stuff. But yeah, it's not comfortable.
No, but aside from the cars, right, there were definitely a lot of very shady motels that we stayed, like pay by the night types of places, drug deals going on everywhere, roaches in these motels.
Did your mom ever try to seek like government help or anything? Did she know? Were there any programs available to you? Did you seek any of that out?
So, I mean, she always had, or usually had, like, food stamps and stuff like that. But as far as, like, shelter assistance or anything, actually, I remember one specific time so a lot of my stories about that time, she had a boyfriend for a while. And he kind of led her down a lot of this bad path, I think. But the point of that is we tried to stay in a shelter once, and they would let me and my mom stay together, but like they wouldn't let all three of us stay together. I guess they didn't want to like mix the men and the women. And so it wasn't like they weren't going to let my mom's boyfriend stay there. They were just like, no, you guys just have to stay in a separate section of this shelter. And because of that, the two of them were like, no, we're just not going to stay. We're just going to like sleep outside tonight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So no thought to your welfare at all, about your well-being.
No, not once. Not ever.
Well, how old were you when you got out of that life?
So I kind of stopped living with my mom like around ninth grade or so, I guess. Like going to school had never really been, or sending me to school had never really been a priority for her.
You
I mean,
didn't go to school when you were...
so like I mostly went to school throughout middle school, but I mean, I was absent a lot to the point that my mom had warrants out for her arrest because I was truant. One day I just like didn't want to go to school, and my mom for some reason like insisted that day. She's like, no, like you're going to school, you have to go to school. I was like, you don't get to tell me what to do. Like you never tell me what to do. You're not taking care of me. Why do you think you get to? And so we actually got into a huge fight about that. And she was basically like, you're either going to school today or you're moving out. I was like, all right, I'll move out.
Where did this newfound go to school thing come from?
I have no idea, none whatsoever. Like it was out of nowhere.
Is your mom still around? May I ask?
Yeah, I mean, I assume so. I talk to her like once a year because she messages me on my birthday, and like she always has a new phone number because she doesn't have like a carrier plan or anything. She gets like basically a burner phone or something.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so like I don't really have much contact with anyone in my family, but as far as I know, she's still alive.
So how did you get out of Kentucky? How did that happen?
When I was 18, I was living off and on with my brother and, whatever girl I happened to be dating at the time, and or staying with friends. And so I was 18 and joined the military. And like, it was actually really funny because out of my entire friend group, like I was the last person who was ever going to join the military. I mean, I'm 5'3", I'm a tiny kid. I was super introverted back then. And like the military was not something you would have ever seen me do. And then, I joined the military. It got me out of Kentucky, and I was in it for 16 years.
That's a long time. Why didn't you do the rest of the 4?
Because I make way more money outside of the military, even when you factor in like retirement and everything.
That's a good reason. That's a definite motivator right there. So what were you? Are you Army, Marines?
I was Navy, and I don't know if we said it already, I did air traffic control for a while. Then I did the hacking thing for a while, which was a lot more fun. And I actually never went on a ship the whole time I was in the Navy.
How did you get into the hacking? What did the Navy have to do with hacking?
Well, as an adult, I had kind of always been into computers. Like, it's not like I ever had one as a kid, right? We couldn't afford any of that. But, I was into programming and like making video games and stuff like that. And I knew about like the cybersecurity type of job field in the Navy, and I'd always wanted to switch over to it, but the timing just kind of never worked out, because in the military, like they have to be able to take you into that job role, and your current job role has to be willing to release you. They have to send you to training, and like, it's a whole nightmare of a situation. So
That's crazy because when I was in the Army, I was in communications. So I was a 32 Romeo. We set up radio, big, huge antennas, ridiculous antennas
yeah,
setting up radio comms between Humvees, basically.
right.
A supply sergeant asked for a female soldier, and they just threw me in the supply room. Like, I didn't train. So then I was a 92 Yankee, although I didn't officially change my MLS, but they just threw me in the supply room, and that's what I was doing. There was like no training, no formal, no paperwork, no nothing.
Yeah.
So that's crazy to hear what you had to go through to change.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it definitely kind of works both ways. We have people who come into the Navy and they don't pick their job. They go in as what's called undesignated. And so you go in, you have no job, and they basically just send you to a ship, and you do all of the worst jobs you can imagine on the ship for like the first 3 years of your career. And then they finally let you switch into like a job that you want
to do. They finally promote you.
Yeah. That's not a fun life from what I hear. Not that I've personally experienced it.
Oh boy, yeah, that's a bit different from the Army. But I didn't even know, like, when I'm at MEPS and I'm going through all this process of paperwork and enlisting, I had no idea that you actually had jobs in the military. Like, I didn't know. So I didn't know to pick a job or to look for, I didn't know. Yeah. They just assigned it to me, and I'm like, oh, whatever, sure, whatever, if that's what I got to do. After the fact, I'm like, I wouldn't have picked that. I would have picked someone, like, what the heck? Why don't you inform me of what I'm doing with my life here?
I mean, the Navy's real big on that because, if you score well on your ASVAB, then they want to like try to put you in the nuclear programs and like all this other stuff. And so, I did score well, and they wanted to
scored well on my ASVAB. Can I ask you what was yours?
So going in, it was an 88, I think.
I was 112, and they put me in communications. Okay, anyway, sorry, moving forward.
No, I don't know. They wanted to put me in these programs, right? But since I didn't go to high school and I had obtained my GED, this is one of those things that I kind of preach about a lot, is that, people in those like extreme poverty situations, like you can have all the resources in the world available to them, right? But if they don't know about those resources, they can't utilize them. And I found that was the biggest hindrance throughout my childhood. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, right? But just not knowing about any of these resources like financial aid or any of that stuff, right?
Yeah, that's why I was asking you about if your mom utilized any of that or checked into it or looked into it. But that's my huge thing with the military, with the VA, is you have all these benefits that you earned, that they have available, that you don't know about.
Yes.
They do not tell you. They don't want you to know.
Yeah, or like they create so many hoops for you to jump through.
Okay, let's not get it confused. I feel like it was one of the best things I ever did besides my children. So, and I have tattoos on both arms, both forearms. The best things I ever did. One is the Army, one is my children's names. So I'm definitely proud to be a veteran. It's just they need to make it better.
Yeah, and I think, because I think it's been a little while since you got out of the military, right?
Oh, a long time.
Yeah, it has definitely improved since then. Of course, there's always more room for improvement. And I can say that I personally did not have a bad experience dealing with the VA after I left the military, and like they made those resources available. But while you're in the military and some of like the college resources and other things they have available to you, they make them known to you. But again, the hoops that you have to jump through, and like they have all these requirements for, you have to be like at your duty station for X amount of years, and you have to do X, Y, and Z before you can apply. And it's just, it's all
they put all these provisions on it. And
it's geared towards like keeping you in longer and utilizing as few of those benefits as possible. And I understand why they're doing it from like a cost cutting maneuver. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. But it's, they obviously they need to change that.
What could be better, potentially?
I think so one of the big things when you get out of the military, right, is your VA healthcare and your disability. And that's something that a lot of people seek out, and they want to get those benefits because they've been in the military, they've earned those benefits. And I think making that process more transparent or not take as long, because it can take months or years to like file your claim and get your claim approved. You gotta go to all these appointments, right? Then I know before this call, right, you and I were talking about the VA math, and they you've got your
not math.
disability up to 50%, and then anything over 50%, they start deducting from the other 50%, and so then it's like percentages of percentages, and
it makes no sense.
Yeah, that whole process is
that's pretty screwy. That we need to know, because if you add it up, like me, I'm well over 100% disabled.
Making this process like more accessible for older veterans or people who left. There are resources for these people, but again, knowing about them and like being able to find them, because like as a homeless kid on the street back in the day, right, I didn't care about these resources. They may have been available, and I'm a homeless kid. It's not my job to worry about these things, right? It's an adult's job to worry about. But even if I had, well, let me not say if I had known about them. I actually talked about this in one of my recent episodes of my podcast, and but aside from that, right, not once throughout my entire childhood at any point did like any school administrator, teacher, or like neighbor or anyone ever like check in on me and be like, hey, how are you doing? Why have you been absent so much? What's going on? How's your home life?
Where was your
guidance counselor?
There you go. Where were they?
Yeah. The first
See how
time
much I know about them because they're so involved in your life. Like,
right.
I can't even think of their
guidance counselor
title.
first time when the year that I went to high school, and that was only because the girl I had been dating, like I was a very bad influence on her, and I had her skipping school so we could go do
I
things.
bet her parents weren't too fond of you.
It's okay. I don't like her parents anyway, but
It's mutual.
But no, so the first time I met a guidance counselor in my life was when we had to go to him and like get our attendance records and give them to her mother to prove that we hadn't been skipping school. But like, maybe don't let the kids go get those, because of course we went to the guidance counselor, we got these attendance records, and the first thing I did was like scan it into a computer and alter it.
What are your thoughts on the politics right now? What's going on right now?
It's the history of our country, right? And not just the country, but humans in general. Like, we're very tribal, and so we just want an enemy who doesn't look like us. And especially in America, right? You think back to like the 1800s and early 1900s, it was the Irish or the Chinese or something like that. We
The
always
Japanese due to World War II,
Yes,
and then it was Germans, and then it was women, and then it was
right. You need someone underneath you that you can point at and say, well, at least I'm better than that person. And, that's what the upper class wants us to have, is someone who we can point at and say, well, at least I'm better than them. That way we don't break out the guillotines, right? It's absolutely not what we should be striving for. They have the quote that goes around on social media that's, I don't know who said it. It was probably just made up at the time, right? But that you have to judge a society by how it treats its, the poorest and the worst off in society, not how it like enriches the ones who already have it. And I think we're very much failing on that account.
Yeah, and it's getting more and more in poverty now. I know people. There's rallies that are these protest rallies, but they turn it into something that it's not. They use it again as a weapon against us, and we're supposed to have freedom. He's going to take all that away. We're not going to be able to speak freely anymore.
No, I think protesting is like the number one right that we have, and I don't think it's utilized in the right way. I mean, peaceful protests are great and they can help get your message out, right? But no one cares, right? I think the essence of protest is disrupting people who wouldn't normally care about your cause to the point that they have to take notice of your cause and do something to fix it, right? Like with unions and union busting and like labor relations back in the early 1900s, right? It was about picketing these companies so that no workers could get in there and produce the goods that people wanted. And once this happened enough and disrupted people's lives enough, then people started to change things. And that's what we're missing. We do like these protests that last a day and like, oh, traffic sucked for a couple of hours, but like, that's it. I move on with my life, right? I don't need to care about your cause. But then you also have people who get angry at the protesters and are violent with them and like try to run them over and stuff. And I mean, that's not the solution, right? Why are you getting angry at these people who are just trying to have their voice heard?
Because they don't like the message and they feel like they are better.
Yeah.
Like what they're saying, they're calling it on us. It's like a narcissistic trait. I'm so speaking out right now. I'm on social media, and everybody that is like, all black people, all white people.
Would you stereotype it and say that all stereotypes are bad?
Yes, that is not a stereotype because it's true. Stereotypes are the worst thing in our society that is holding us back from progression, from moving forward and learning from past mistakes.
Right, and I mean, these stereotypes are really a problem too because, and we're all guilty of them, but I mean, even the background that I came from, right, growing up homeless, even today, if I'm like out shopping or just driving around and I see a homeless person, you know, it's, my instinct is immediately to look down on that person for the way that they're living. And, you know, it's insane from how I grew up, right? And I think part of it is like society's influence on me.
Yeah, you were there.
Right. I honestly think that contributes to it a little bit because I want these people to get the help that they need. I want them to not be homeless. I want them to have everything that they need and everything that they want. I want them to get a piece of that American dream. But it's, I have to remind myself.
There's too many factors involved.
Yeah, exactly. I have to remind myself that, like, as terrible as I grew up, I still grew up as a white male in America and above average intelligence, right? So I was able to do something.
You already had advantages that some of them don't have. Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, I have to remind myself of that when I see them and like, no, like, don't judge these people. You were there once and you just happened to have a few advantages and luck, right? Because success in life is almost always down to luck. Like, it's rarely about how hard you work. Well, like I have friends, right? And they're, you know, they're out there hustling every day, and you know, they're like grinding, they're like doing all of these side hustles to try to make money, and you know, they're bringing in like $20 here, $40 there, and like they see these influencers on social media telling them that that's what they need to do and they're going to be rich. But like, you're not going to be rich like making $20 off of this side hustle. That's not how you're going to do it. If you are in the right place at the right time with your side hustle, then sure, you could do it. But again, like, luck is number one.
How do we change the automatic snap instinct to judge?
You know, honestly, I don't think that that's what you change, because I don't think there is a way to, I think we're all going to make that instant judgment, and I don't think you can stop that, because like that's how we evolved to survive, right? By instantly judging our surroundings. I think the trick is in realizing that you've made that snap judgment, taking a moment to step back and analyze why you made that judgment, and then realize, was this a correct judgment, or do I need to think about this some more? Because sometimes that snap judgment is correct, right? And we need that. But like, make that judgment and then take a step back, figure out if it was correct, and like, why did you think that? Am I being an asshole, basically?
That's a good point. Yeah. So you can have the judgment in your head, like you can have that automatic reaction, but then analyze it.
Exactly. And I think that's the only way you improve that situation.
I like it. That's what we don't do. We don't understand other people's point of views. We don't understand their situation. You never know why a person is doing what they're doing, or how they came to be that way.
Right. All you see is what's on the surface and what they're presenting. And, you know, we have to be responsible to ourselves to understand that there's more going on there that we may not understand.
That's a huge thing that we don't do.
I think it's also, you know, the person presenting this to the world, right? I think they have to take some responsibility for how they're presenting that to the world, because while I need to be more sympathetic, empathetic, one of those words fits here, and understand their situation. Like if they're having a bad day, like stop and think, no, like if they snap at me, right? I need to understand they may be having a bad day and they didn't mean it. Like maybe they've never snapped at me before and this is very unusual. But they also have to be responsible for themselves and knowing that they are having a bad day, and so they shouldn't snap at someone. And so I think both of those issues are really the same issue, in that we just need more self-reflection and understanding of why we are doing the things we're doing and why we feel the way we feel.
And it is. It's an effort from both sides.
Right. But, ultimately, the ones who are on the receiving end of it are often failing a lot because they're just reacting and not taking that step back, like I said.
True. For every action, there is a reaction, and the only thing that we can control about life is our reaction.
Yeah. And it is certainly not easy. I have personally spent a week in the psych ward of a mental hospital, dealing with some things, and like I was one of those people who always thought that I would never need therapy and like I can deal with my own issues, but like we all have some skills we can learn to better deal with our own thoughts and the way we react to things.
That's a hot topic in and of itself, the whole mental health issue and how it was so taboo years ago. It's making improve. It's improved. We're making people more aware of the importance, not and that it isn't taboo, that it is something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you could figure out yourself, will go so far in helping you figure out other people and being able to have a dialogue. Because I was, a very, yeah, I was actually just talking about this in my most recent episode of my podcast, I think, where I was talking about how I've always been a pretty chill person and it takes a lot to get me really riled up and stuff. But I'm going to contradict myself and say that I've also always been like I have a real like angry streak, and it takes a lot to bring that out in me. But like once you bring that out, I mean, like you're on my shit list for the rest of your life. Like that's it. Our relationship is over. And understanding that, I've always known that about myself, but like understanding that it doesn't have to be that way and like analyzing my feelings, I'm like, well, why am I acting this way? Do I really need to be acting this way? Is this in my best interest and everyone else's best interest? And I learned a lot of those tools when I was in the hospital, and just a lot of that self-reflection, and it has helped me make great strides in my personal relationships with people.
And if we all just work on ourselves instead of worrying about the next person and what they're doing and why they are the way they are, if we work on ourselves and grow as an individual, it will go a long way to growing as.
Yeah, absolutely. So the military is all about like they tell you to seek the help that you need, like don't let it get too far, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to believe that they care about that, but I think that the issue is, they would always give us the training on like what they call the operational stress continuum, and like if you're green, then you're operating at full capacity, and like you can contribute to the team. If you're yellow, like maybe you need to take a break, get a little bit more sleep or something. And then when you're red, like you don't want to get into the red, right? Because that's danger territory. That's like, yeah, but I don't think that they do a good job of helping people identify when you're going from the green to the yellow or the red. And because that was my issue, right? Like I knew it was bad to be in the red, right? You don't want to be in the red. You need to take breaks and stuff. But I couldn't identify in myself that I needed help because I was just used to operating at such a high tempo and like dealing with all this stress. That was just my daily normal, that I didn't realize what it was doing to me and that this shouldn't be normal and that it's negatively affecting my life.
Yeah, well, you grow up with a lot of norms to you that are not normal to other people.
Yeah. Having good role models too can go a long way, because I've met a few people over the last 5 or 6 years who like they were just such genuinely good people. And like so in everyday conversation, like we rib each other, we like we mock each other in like a loving way, right? You don't mean anything malicious by it, but it can still negatively affect someone. And it, I'm not saying that we should stop that at all, because like that's how we bond place. But like I've met some people who would like never do that. I've met this guy, and I never heard a single negative thing come out of this guy's mouth. He was always building you up, and like he would play video games with people, right? Like he would play what's the popular one, Call of Duty. You can tell I don't play these, and it's a competitive game, right? You're trying to kill the other team, and like if the other team managed to kill him, he would never like talk shit to them or be mad about it. Like he would always build them up. Be like, man, that was a great shot. I can't believe you did that. Good job. And like, he's building up the person who just beat him in this game. And like, I think that was such an admirable quality. And like, I try to remember that and emulate that in my life. And of course, it's not easy at all because that's not really who I am. But I want to be more like that person.
All right, give me your take on between the aisles now. There's so much tension. There's so much more than it used to be. There's so much more aggression.
I think in this instance, right, it's by definition, conservatives are resistant to change, right? They want to conserve what they have. They don't want anything to change. They don't want stuff new. And liberals do, right? We want things to change. We want to grow. And so they see anything that's change as an attack on them personally. And like it's actually something that I've thought a lot about because it's kind of a recent phenomenon, right? Like, back in the Middle Ages and stuff, like you would go generations of like your peasant family lived on this farm, right? And they farmed this land for generations, like hundreds of years went by and nothing in this town ever changed. I think that's what we're used to as humans is like things never changing. And now in 2025, things change daily, like cataclysmic changes constantly. And I don't think we're equipped to deal with it. And so, like what I was saying with the conservative backlash, I think it's a response to that because they're just following their human nature. And I'm not saying it's right. I've said already that we need to evolve past these things that we've learned because they're not useful for living in society. But I understand why they're doing it. It's human nature, and they don't want to change as quickly as things are currently changing. And so that's, I think, what the backlash comes from.
Yeah, Josh, I got to say, I really like how you broke that down, that liberals kind of embrace change a little more, and that as where conservatives would like to conserve things. I know that change is feared, change is unknown, and what is unknown is feared. That was a very good way to break it down, and I like it. So I think that's a good point to end the show with that very good point that you had. Because I'm pretty sure we could just keep going and going all day. Um, but I want to thank you once again for being here. And why don't you go ahead and tell us about your podcast one more time?
Yeah. So my podcast is called From Homeless to Mansion. It's everywhere you find podcasts, and it's just going on about my story from being the homeless child I talked about to being successful now and like all of the wild and awful things that happened to me throughout that time. Yeah, thank you. Hopefully, people can get some inspiration from it, some motivation, and even if they don't, maybe they just are along to hear some wild stories. But yeah, whichever.
All right. Do be sure to check out Mr. Josh's podcast. And I want to thank you all for being here. This is From Dirt We Grow. Josh and Stephanie are out. See you next week, guys. Thanks.